Welcome to By Seat and By Saddle, seeing North America by car and by motorcycle. After our retirement in 2011, my wife Sue and I made a number of road trips around North America, taking pictures of what we saw and recording what we did. Thinking our experiences might be useful to others planning similar road trips, we decided to preserve and share our travel diaries. This is part 5, the last part of a travel diary we made of a trip we took in March and April of 2014. We spent most of our time in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and Mississippi, but did see many other interesting things along the way. We have again repeated our list of all the things we saw on this trip to help you decide what highlights might interest you or find any pictures you might want to look at again. Part 4 ended with our goodbye to Arizona and crossing the lower corner of New Mexico to enter Texas. So come on and continue this trip with us. We will again take you along with words and photographs. It's always a pleasure to share them with you. Remember, you can stop the video at any time for a closer look at any photograph. About 11 miles into New Mexico, near where Highway 338 connects with the I-10, we became anxious when we saw a huge dirt devil moving across the desert to our right. Dirt devils are many tornadoes formed by the rapid heating of air above sun-warmed earth and are most common in deserts. We weren't sure how strong they are or whether such large ones could flip our trailer over. Luckily, we still don't know. This one didn't hit us. By evening, we had crossed the New Mexico-Texas state line and reached El Paso. El Paso residents are 81% Hispanic, which makes El Paso the second largest Hispanic majority city in the United States. Intrigued by its long and interesting history, we stayed for 2 nights and visited a couple of local museums. At the Museum of History, photography with DSLR cameras, like our camera, was not permitted except for the exterior of the building and the outdoor grounds. We therefore enjoyed the exhibits but took no pictures. The Museum of Archaeology is located in Wilderness Park. Although photography was permitted, we only took a couple of pictures inside the museum. This museum has a 1-mile nature trail outside the building, with many varieties of desert plants. We started out on a short walk. We immediately saw some wildlife, a brave little lizard that let us get close enough to take a couple of photographs of him. After a long Google search, I determined that it was a greater earless lizard because it had no ear openings, which enables it to burrow in the sand, and also a recessed chin. It was a male because of the 2 dark black stripes just in front of the hind legs. Couldn't get over the long toes. Surely must have hampered running. These lizards eat insects and live to be about 3 years old. Suddenly, Sue started hopping about with sharp pains in both feet. She immediately took off her Crocs, but we couldn't find anything inside them. Eventually, we thought to turn them over and immediately saw the reason. There were 20 or more of the most incredible burrs we have ever seen. Strong and sharp enough to penetrate the Crocs, it was impossible to walk over them without being impaled. I then turned over my shoes and saw I hadn't been spared. They are apparently called goat head burrs, and it actually took pliers to pull them out. They can produce lesions on the mouths or feet of animals that encounter them. Thankfully, we had never seen any before and have never seen any since. Leaving El Paso, we traveled east quickly, and after about 1,000 miles, we crossed the Mississippi River, which is the Mississippi-Louisiana state line here, and found ourselves in the historic city of Vicksburg. 2 bridges cross the Mississippi at this location, the Vicksburg Bridge on the left and the Mississippi River Bridge, also called the Old Vicksburg Bridge, on the right. The Vicksburg Bridge is quite a new bridge. It was opened in 1973, is 12,974 feet long, and carries 4 lanes of traffic. The Mississippi River Bridge, or Old Vicksburg Bridge, is 8,546 feet long and was opened in 1930. Prior to 1998, it carried both vehicular and rail traffic, but now is used only for trains. It was interesting to us that this bridge is maintained by a Canadian railway holding company called Canadian Pacific Kansas City Limited, or CPKC. The company shield prominently features both a beaver and a maple leaf, which are both iconic Canadian symbols. We soon learned that Vicksburg was the site of a horrendous Civil War battle for control of the lower Mississippi. The U.S. National Park Service indicates Union losses were 806 killed and 3,940 wounded, while Confederate losses were 805 killed and 1,938 wounded. We drove into the Vicksburg National Military Park. Cannons played a huge role in the Battle of Vicksburg. In the movie Gone with the Wind, Rhett Butler apparently says there was not a single cannon factory in the South before the Civil War. My Google search suggested there actually was one such factory and that others soon became operational. Some U.S. states built memorials to the soldiers from their state. This one represented Illinois. It has 60 bronze tablets on the interior walls with the names of all 36,325 Illinois soldiers who fought at Vicksburg. It is made of granite and marble and has a huge dome with the most incredible acoustics and echoes. One could hear a whisper across the whole diameter of the dome. We tried to capture the echoes of my speaking voice and Sue humming at whisper volume. This is what it sounded like.
Okay. Do it. Yeah.
The Wisconsin Memorial is 122 feet high and made of granite. It contains bronze tablets with the names of the 9,075 Wisconsin soldiers in the Vicksburg battle. The memorial to the Union Navy is 202 feet high and the tallest in the park. Milliken's Bend was an isolated Mississippi River supply outpost 15 miles northwest of Vicksburg. It was defended in hand-to-hand combat by black Union troops. The Vicksburg National Cemetery was established in 1866 and contains the remains of 17,000 Union servicemen. This number is more than any other cemetery in the country. For me, the most interesting display in the military park was the USS Cairo. I would pronounce the name as Cairo, but the correct pronunciation is apparently Cairo. The USS Cairo was one of 7 ironclad river gunboats that became part of the Union Navy's Mississippi River Squadron. They were especially designed with an extremely shallow 6-foot draft in order to navigate the Mississippi River and its tributaries. All were 175 feet long, carried 13 guns, and were built in 100 days, which is remarkable even in wartime. On December 12, 1862, the USS Cairo was clearing mines on the Yazoo River 7 miles north of Vicksburg. Suddenly, 2 mines exploded against her hull. She sank in 12 minutes in 36 feet of water. The mines were detonated by volunteers concealed in torpedo pits behind the levee. The Cairo was found in 1956, raised in 1964, and after a prolonged period of restoration was finally put on display in 1977. The iron cladding was 2.5 inches thick around the placement of the guns and was expected to withstand direct artillery hits. It was supported on white oak planks that were up to 2 feet thick. It was interesting seeing the use of railroad ties to extend the armored area. This was apparently done by the crew to increase the boat's protection. The ironclad gunboats were apparently vulnerable to hogging, which is upward bowing of the ship's hull, and required hogging chains in their structural design. Didn't seem like good engineering practice to me, but if it worked, why argue? The 22-foot diameter paddle wheel was thought to be fitted with wooden paddles. The paddle wheel was driven by a steam engine receiving steam from 5 boilers that were 36 inches in diameter and 24 feet long. The steam was harnessed by cylinders 22 inches in diameter with a 6-foot stroke. As with all ships at that time, steering was accomplished with simple rudders. There were 2 of them on the gunboats, each one almost under the rear-facing cannons. Continuing east, we entered Alabama and began driving up around the west side of Mobile Bay. In the distance, we could see the superstructure of the USS Alabama, a South Dakota-class fast battleship from World War II and now a museum. She was 680 feet long, had a top speed of 31.6 miles per hour, and in wartime carried a crew of 2,500 men. However, we didn't stop to tour her and continued on, hoping to reach a good camping spot before nightfall. However, I have inserted a picture of her from the U.S. National Archives to show what she looked like. Not much further along, we came upon Meteor State Park, which is on an island in the Tensas River near the upper tip of the Mobile Bay. The park has a nice boardwalk over swamp containing alligators, one of which we saw. It was a pretty spot, especially at night when the lights of the Mobile, Alabama Causeway reflected off the water of Mobile Bay. Unfortunately, heavy rains were forecast for that night, and a flash flood warning had been issued for the entire region. We kept thinking about those alligators and maybe having to share a campsite with them during the night. So we packed up and moved to a microtel in nearby Daphne. Totally contrary to park policy, the park staff refunded our camping fee. Real Alabama neighborliness. Now we're on our way north again. The Alabama countryside along the way was always nice to look at. In northern Alabama, we stopped at Lake Guntersville State Park and day tripped on a motorcycle for a couple of days. The GPS on our motorcycle was really valuable in exploring the tangle of countryside roads. Lake Guntersville is on the Tennessee River in a very scenic area of hills, lakes, woods, and abundant wildlife. And the deer were completely unafraid of us. I worried that the trust they seemed to have in our two-legged species was seriously misplaced. Just before continuing homeward, we were riding our motorcycle on a little day trip when in the middle of the countryside we noticed a sign for a storm shelter. Even though there wasn't a cloud in the sky, we decided to check it out. This is how the folks living in Tornado Alley apparently prepare for the worst. It was a banked steel cylinder with massive end doors. We were majorly impressed. We have since learned by Googling that this shelter, a Safe T shelter, was built by an Alabama company and is EF5 rated and FEMA compliant. It should be noted that Alabama is definitely vulnerable to tornadoes. For example, on April 27, 2011, 62 tornadoes and several waves took over 250 lives. It was clear that the door to get in was never locked. The lights were always on, and the fan and humidifier were running continuously. Once inside, the doors could be locked with 3 extremely strong deadbolts. Couldn't help trying to imagine what it would be like in here, hearing a tornado roar by overhead. April 22nd was the 25th day of our trip and our last night before reaching home, so we treated ourselves to a nice hotel in Lima, Ohio. This is the end of Part 5 and concludes Trip 11. We explored El Paso and enjoyed its rich Hispanic flavor. In Vicksburg, Mississippi, we couldn't help being saddened by the terrible human cost of the Civil War battle for control of the lower Mississippi. Finally, on the way home, we stopped whenever we felt the urge to cruise the countryside on the motorcycle. We encountered wildlife that wasn't very wild and learned about storm shelters for folks in Tornado Alley. Arriving home, we had driven 11,343 kilometers with the car and trailer and rode 1,144 kilometers on the motorcycle. It was really nice to go, but it was also very nice to be home.